Have you ever had an idea that you thought was a fantastic idea? Some idea that you're like, this is gonna make me $1 million, or man, someone should really create this product or do this thing or whatever. You just have this idea and you're like, oh man, isn't that great? You probably wrote it down on your notes and you probably thought about it and you're like, oh man, this is so great. And then a year goes by and you never took action on it. And then come to find out someone else stole your idea, robbed you, ran with it, and made it a thing. And now you're like, I came up with that years ago or a year ago. I should have done something with it. And you have this regret. Today on this episode 3, I'm talking about the brutally honest truth about overthinking. Welcome to Branding Beyond Business. I'm your host, John Mediana. Let's get it. It is something that I've struggled with my whole entire life. And if you're like me, you probably have too. If you're a creative or a business owner or just a human being, because we've been given so much to dream about and to ideate in imagination. It's what separates us from animals, by the way. But in this episode, we're going to be talking about the brutally honest truth about overthinking and some things that I've learned along the journey that may actually help you navigate through it. All right. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you're probably thinking, why does he have 2 mics? Well, I'm just going to let you know, I'm test learning and adapting. I'm trying to figure out what audio quality is better. Is it the microphone that's plugged in that gives me this podcast style looking vibe? Or is it this audio from the camera that's going straight to the camera with this brand new DJI wireless mic? So bear with me. I'm not perfect. And this show, in fact, Branding Beyond Business, is all about being a safe place to fail. So if you're hanging out with me for the first time and we never met, my name's John Mediana. I've been a creative for over 20 years and I've launched businesses, closed businesses, the whole thing. And I've learned so much from the industry and being in business. We currently own our own agency. We're here in Tennessee. And I get to share my thoughts and experiences. And this is a place for me to just go ham. So welcome to my channel, Branding Beyond Business. And today we're tackling a really challenging and difficult topic. And maybe it's not, maybe you saw the thumbnail, maybe you saw the headline, you're like, what's this all about? Maybe you skipped it and you're like, I don't need to be talking about that. I don't want to hear about that. But maybe you clicked on this because you're like, I'm curious. So if you did click on this and you're listening to this right now, I want to give a big thank you and warm welcome and buckle up because today we are going deep into this conversation and I'm not going to hold back. And the first thing I think when I think about overthinking and all this is coming to the place of understanding that you're overthinking, because you might not know that you're overthinking. I sure didn't. I thought it was common sense. I didn't even know where the line was from just thinking about something or doing something or an idea to taking action and overthinking. When I say overthinking, my wife will actually say it really well. It's not overthinking. I think the over part correlates and is directly attached to the fear of it failing, or you're looking for every way this idea could fail. And that's where I would replace overthinking with failure thinking, right? Failure thinking, like thinking of the million different ways an idea could possibly fail, right? Maybe I'm putting too much investment. Maybe I'm going to lose my money. Maybe I'm going to look like an idiot in front of everybody. Maybe I'm, what if this doesn't happen? Let me tell you, from a person that's created hundreds of brands and ideas and executed and took action on a lot and took action on zero, you're always going to overthink no matter what. You're always going to see the good side and the bad side. And when you overthink, you lean more towards the failing part that never actually allows you to test, learn, and adapt. And that is something that we're going to talk about today. TLA all day. Say it with me out loud right now. I know you're going to feel stupid, but say this with me out loud. So if you're listening to me right now, whether you're in your car, in the gym, you got your headphones on, maybe you're watching this on YouTube, pause right now and say this out loud. Say TLA all day. Say it with me. Ready? 3, 2, 1. TLA all day. Test, learn, adapt. That's what that means. And let me tell you, when you are trying to punch overthinking in the face, you're going to have to tell yourself TLA all day. You're going to have to say it out loud. You're going to have to look in the mirror and tell yourself, I'm testing, I'm learning, I'm adapting. That's what life is. You are learning and you're winning and losing at the same time. Your business is about to break through and fail in complete bankruptcy at the same time. This is exciting. This is part of life. So before you go into test, learn, adapt, how do you actually navigate through overthinking? How do you even recognize that you're overthinking? That's the first thing, right? So when I started doing creativity, I was very young. I picked up a camera. I think the moment I could walk, my first words were content. And because my dad, you remember my dad's, he was a Vietnam vet, so he came to America. He used to love to, he was like a tourist. He was taking photos, right? When I grew up, I seen all these boxes and boxes of old photographs that he processed and, with those old films, and he loved photography. That's actually where I got a lot of my photography background, because we had cameras all around the house. I had video cameras, those VHS cassette tape camera, the JVCs and stuff in my house. I had old photo cameras and I would take, get film and process. I loved it. And he taught me the joys of documenting. He used it for a documentary purpose to remind himself, of where he's been and what he's gone through. And that taught me that was a magical aha moment in my life when I was just a little kid, where I could take a picture and that completely froze time in its element. And I could look back and be like, I remember that, because our memories kind of fade away. Oh, what was that first experience? What was that first time? And when you look at an old photo, photo says 1,000 words, video says hundreds of millions of words, right? So that's why I fell in love with video. But I remember when I first went into the dark room to process film, I was 10 or 11 years old. I was a freshman in high school, and I literally had to take old film, take photos, understand the mechanism of what makes an image come to life on a camera, right? From ISO to shutter speed to all those things. What is your iris, right? The focal length, the f-stops, all that stuff. You got to know those things when you're doing manual analog work, and digital, it translates. That's why it's really good to learn manually first and then go digital, because you know what everything does. I think that's what is missing in the art. Sometimes everything's just automated, right? Your iPhone, you just push it and it automatically adjusts everything, but you don't understand that there's those three elements happening, which is your shutter speed, how fast the shutter is clicking on and off, right? Your f-stop, how much light you're actually allowing in, and your ISO, which is the sensitivity of the digital part. Now it's digital, but before it was a sensitivity of film, right? How sensitive your film is to light. So I would have to go in the dark room and actually literally do things like I'm blindfolded, and I would take out the film, I'd roll it up, and I'd put it in this little container, and then I would put some processing liquid in the chemicals in there, and I would shake it up, make sure it's all in there, then throw it into the dark room with a red light, and then go through this process. And if I didn't go through the process the proper way, you're not going to get the image that you clicked on, or the vision that you saw through that eyepiece when you first snapped the photo. And if you don't set those things right, those mechanisms like the shutter speed and the ISO, you're going to get a whole completely different photo at the end. You wouldn't be able to kind of figure out what the end product would be. So you got to understand that mechanism in order to get that process dialed in right. And when you master the craft, you could literally look at, an image and be like, oh yeah, that's going to be at f-stop 100 or 200. That's going to be at, this. I could literally look at any room and any light and be like, that's the color temperature now. After the 20 something years that I've been doing this for, I could literally look at a scene and be like, I could get it really, if not perfect, really close to those settings, because I've trained myself through time. It's like a muscle, right? I've trained myself through experience by saying, oh yeah, that's, shoot at this f-stop, you're going to shoot at this shutter speed, you're going to have this ISO setting, mostly because I've just been in the game for so long, and you're going to learn how to do that when you master a craft. But the idea is, that visualization, that illustration of process is the same thing about overthinking for me. Like if I didn't push, record on anything, or if I didn't push the shutter button or anything, I would never have an image. I would never actually go through the process, right? And I'd have to do a few of those. You don't just shoot one image when you first start doing photography and film. You don't capture one image. You capture hundreds of images, and you look through them to find the perfect one. You test each one. You're like, oh, I like this. That's a good angle. That's great lighting. There was a super authentic moment, right? Especially if you ever been into wedding photography, if you ever done weddings, I don't recommend doing it. I've done like 3 or 4 in my whole entire life, and I was like, nope, that's not for me, right? You could ask DJ about his wedding stories, photography stories, but it's the worst. There's so much pressure on you, right, to capture that one moment. And if you miss it, you got to be shooting at a high shutter speed, at all times, burst mode, right, to capture every single. You can't miss that one special image. Now, when I think about overthinking, when I think about the process and all that stuff, I really correlate that to the creativity process and the process of making film. Because the idea is that you have millions of ideas, and if you don't take action on any of them, you're not going to have a product, right? And you're not going to be able to see that end product and be like, I should probably tweak that. I can't tell you how many times I had to retake photos, redo things because I went through the process, and after the process was done, it didn't come out the way I wanted to. So I had to go back and re-edit things. Still digitally, I do this on a daily basis, but this is something I also learned from the agency world. And a lot of creatives, if you're a creative and you're listening to me right now, here is a pro tip for you. Do not fall in love with the first edit, okay? The first iteration of your product. And artists and creatives this is the worst attribute, I think, that you could be when you're a common sense person and you're thinking about like, it's good enough. Like, why are you perfection? We want to smash perfection in the face. This is perfection at its finest. It's like my one shot has to be the masterpiece. My one take has to be that masterpiece. I'm that good. Get over yourself. I'm just going to be real. Just get over yourself. You are not that good. You need practice. You don't wake up and piss awesome. Sorry, that was a Talladega Nights. I had to say it. I'm telling you, you are not as good as you think. All right? If we could take anything away, I'm not as good as I think, and I've been here for a long time. Even the best of the best that you compare yourself to, the business owners, the creatives that you compare yourself to, they're not as good as you think. The only reason why you think they're good is because they've published it. They got it out there and they're consistent and they're just doing the thing and they're just constantly doing it. They're taking action and you have not. That is the only reason why you think they're better than you, that they're more experienced than you, then they're more talented than you, is because they're actually building it in public and they're actually failing in public. And I guarantee you, if you asked any of them what they thought about their own work, they would give you the most insecure answer you've ever heard in your life. Why? Because I have asked them that. And they're like, oh man, I didn't like this about this. I didn't like this. But the thing that they did right that you didn't do is that they actually published, that they actually didn't care. They almost like, I don't care. ID gaff. I'm just gonna hit record. I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna test it. I'm gonna grow. And here's the thing about overthinking journey, right? At first, you look like an idiot. Okay. When I told my family I didn't want to become a nurse or a mailman or work at the DMV, I didn't want a government secured job. I wanted to pursue filmmaking. I went to film school for 6 years, starting in Santa Monica. They looked at me like I was crazy. My mom was like, that's just a hobby, Jonathan. That's just a hobby. It's a weekend thing. Oh, your uncle does that on the week. It's a hobby. What? You can't actually have secure job. You can't actually have, in fact, there's a funny story on my engagement party. And if you were there, shout out, just leave a comment if you were at my engagement party in San Diego when I proposed to Britt and surprised her and stuff. Shout out to my guys and my friends that were there. Kylan Road, James, Dave, all my bros, right? I had at that point in my life, I had percentage in 3 companies and I was hustling. I worked 24/7. I was a workaholic. I'm going to admit all of my 20s, I was a workaholic. right? I didn't party. I didn't do anything. I didn't have a lot. I was just working so much. I didn't even care about relationships. I was just like, not really just romantic, really. I didn't care because I was like, I love to work and I love working with people. That's all I did in my 20s. And when I was like, I think it's time to slow down. My mom, we were all saying something about us, right? Everybody was going around saying what they love about us and what, they're kind of like speaking life into us, praying over us. And my mom goes to my mother-in-law. She goes like, "Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure that you want your daughter to marry Jonathan, huh?" And I was like embarrassed because the following thing was like, because he does not have a job. He does not have a job, a security. Are you okay with that? And I had two of my business owners, my business partners, literally standing there listening to this conversation. Everybody that are my friends started busting out laughing because they all knew how hard I work and how much I hustled and what companies I was part of and how much percentage I had in companies and all this stuff. They were laughing because my mom had zero idea. She had no idea that actually creativity took me to a place of making six figures and all that stuff early on in my 20s. And sorry, it was hilarious to me because, and that kind of like, I laugh at it now. At the time, I was probably embarrassed. At the time, I was pretty frustrated and probably like, oh, mom, why would you say that? That's so hurtful. I am who I am today because of my Asian mom, because of my Filipino mother, who absolutely says the things that you don't want to hear out of love and concern. She absolutely loved and concerned. She had a lot of concern for the direction of my life, and I appreciated her for it. And I see that out of love. I don't see it out of spite or embarrassment. She absolutely loves me, and I know that. But that was one example of overthinking, or that's just one example. So like testing things, learning and adapting. Going back to the idea of the brutal, honest truth about overthinking, here is I took the route of being a creative. And I said, I'm going to test this thing out because I remember one significant moment where I was having a quarrel with my mom. And this was while I was in college. And she said, why don't you just get a normal job? Why don't you? And she was so concerned. You could hear the concern in her voice. And I sat there and I was like arguing with her. And I looked at a magazine. There was like a magazine. I forgot what magazine was on the table. And I picked up the magazine. I said, someone had to take this photo. And I flipped through the magazine. Someone had to make this advertisement. Someone had to choose the font. Someone had to take a photo in a studio and they actually make money doing that. I showed her the magazine. I was like, this creative direction will never go away. If there is a business out there in the world, if there's only, and there's, by the way, millions of business owners. I said, if there is business in existence, they need creatives. I remember this argument that I made, and it was a profound moment for me and validated how I actually felt because she actually made me dig deep and ask the question, why am I doing this? Is this sustainable? Is this the direction I want to go? And it validated my feelings of like, this is what I want to do. I want to create. I want to take photos and share stories and learn film, even if I sucked at the time. Because let me tell you, I sucked bad. I had two best friends growing up tell me how bad I was at Photoshop and photography and film. They told me that I should quit. They told me to give up. They said, this probably isn't for you. I don't know why you're going to college for this. And I remember my response to them was, I don't care what you said. Tomorrow I will be better because if I put in the work, if I put in the hours, if I put in that, I will be better tomorrow than I am today. And I'm going to figure this out. That never stopped me. And I could have took two different roads at that moment. I could have quit and said, you're probably right. I'm going to go do the normal route. Or I could say, I'm going to get better tomorrow if I put more time into it. I chose to put in the work at that moment, even when my best friends were telling me to quit. And today you might be sitting there listening to this podcast and you might need to hear someone tell you that you got two roads. You got two choices. And I'm not going to be the person to tell you that you should quit. I'm going to be the person to tell you that you should try again and again And again, keep testing, keep testing, keep testing. When all else fails, test again. That's what I want to tell you. And you learn from it, and you adapt, and you optimize, and you recreate, and you redesign, and you rebrand. You know how many rebrands I personally have been through for my personal brand? I can't even count. It's like every couple months I reinvent myself back in the day. But let me tell you, this feels so much better to me. Branding beyond business, this podcast, this show, this YouTube channel, I am not going to give up. Sharing my story behind the brand that you see, behind the things, the businesses. I want to bring people on this show that aren't afraid to share their story, their struggles, their trench stories, their lessons, the things that they've learned that goes so much against the grain of society and culture and business that it's not going to be flashy clickbaits. It's literally going to be raw. It's like, man, I'm almost like I hope it doesn't blow up because I'm keeping this from, these are the things I need to hear. These are the things I need my kids to hear when they grow up and go through the fight and the struggle like we talked about in the last episode, right? So test, learn, and adapt. How do you test, learn, and adapt? I'm going to give you some pointers here. And the first way to do that, and I learned this in my marriage with my lovely, beautiful, gorgeous, just so bold wife. She's so courageous. I admire her so much. I learned this when we were first getting married. Remember when I said that I'm an astronaut and I'm like out in outer space? Well, she's ground control, and we have another podcast together called Dear Houston, and Dear Houston's all about that journey of being married to a dreamer and a vision person, and her being ground control and saying like, hey, she's a realist, right? So what I learned is when we first got married, and I'll let her tell the story more in depth, but I think it was my father-in-law or someone that had mentioned to us that John is like a guy who blows up these balloons. These ideas are like balloons, and I hand them to her and I say, hey, hold on to these real quick, and then I'll go and make more balloons, and then I turn back and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing with those balloons? She's like, you told me to hold them, and I was like, no, like, forget about those balloons. Like I'm on to these other balloons. And there's some balloons I want to hold on to and keep me accountable for. And there's some balloons that we just probably need to let go of. And that was a really great illustration for me of understanding my self-awareness, is that I'm blowing up these ideas and these I just got millions of ideas and I put them down, I write them down, and I'm like, hey babe, hold this idea for me. I'm gonna come back to it in 2 weeks, and if it's still good, if it's still validated, if it's still what's on my heart, keep it, and if it's not, let it go. And she's just been such an accountability buddy for me. And I if you don't have that person in your life, number one, I'm truly sorry. You got to go find one. You got to go find that special person, because you can't do life on your own. You're not designed for that. You're not designed to be a solo person, right? You're so low that your life is so low. Just kidding. But I was telling her, like, hey, hold these balloons, and I'll come back and whatever. But she also has her own balloons, right? She has her own dreams. She has her own things. And I want to support that, and encourage that as well. But when I first started figuring out, okay, I need to put these ideas somewhere. So we came up with this idea of creating a dream desert, all right? A dream desert. And I'll explain to you what this is. This is the first step that you should do if you're trying to navigate through overthinking, okay? If you're really trying to grab the reins on overthinking, do this. First, brain dump everything into an imaginary dream desert, because you just throw everything out there. You put it in the desert, you put it in this bucket, you put it in the dream desert, and if it grows, right, in the desert, and you start seeing things sprout, you start seeing things like, wow, there's something happening, you go and you take that and you start watering it, okay? You start nurturing it. What do I mean by that? You throw it in the dream desert and you give it a 2-week test. You're like, do I feel the same way in 2 weeks? Do I feel the same way the next day? Do I feel the same way about that idea? You go back to the dream desert, and there's maybe some things that you felt God was telling you to start long time ago. and you just forgot about it, and you just kind of let it go. But I'm telling you, you put it in your spirit for a reason, and you put it in your thoughts for a reason. So you put that idea, whatever you feel like he's telling you to do, put it in your dream desert. Come back to it, pray on it, think about it, give it some life, give it some, if it comes to life, if it absolutely feels like, wow, this is the direction I should go, you should probably water it. Okay, so that's the first thing. Put those ideas out on paper, write it in your notepad, share it with your spouse, your partner, right? Your comrade, right? Your bestie. And then be like, hey, remember that thing I talked about? There's so many moments where I come back to my wife, Britt, and I say, hey, remember that one idea that I had? Well, it keeps on popping up. I see it everywhere, just visually. Maybe I'm driving on the freeway and I see a sign, or I'm talking to a client or a friend, and it comes up in conversation. It won't stop coming up. Those are signs to me that, okay, there's something happening with that idea. You should probably chase it, right? And the next thing that you want to do once you recognize that those things won't go away is you want to hyper prototype. Write this down in your brain. Hyper prototype your ideas. What does hyper prototype mean? This is the problem that creatives have, that I've had for the longest time, and I had to get over it and I had to learn. We fall in love too quickly with projects that we invest into, that we're not willing to, when we've gone too far in investment, to let it go and let it die, or put it aside or shelf it and move on. We get too clingy and saying this is the greatest thing, and this happens to a lot of engineer friends of mine, is that they put too much time and said, they're going through the process. They make this product or service like, this is going to solve so many problems. This is going to solve world hunger. It's going to solve cancer. It's going to do this. And then they forgot, they got so involved and invested in the process of making the thing and engineering it, that they forgot about, well, who's going to know without marketing? Who's going to know about the product? Like, you should have been sharing the process publicly. You should have been documenting the process at least, so that you have these things that you could share about the product and why you should care. Why should other people care? That's my question. Why should other people care about the thing that you care about? That's a great question to have when you're hyper prototyping. Hyper prototyping. So prototyping, number one, is creating a prototype of something and investing money, creating a timeline, right? Creating a hypothesis. If you do this, A plus B, it should equal C at this time, spending this much money, and this is the results. Let's hypothesize, and then prototype, and then execute, and then, go ahead and launch it and test it out. Launch beta with a small batch, right? So, and then you test it out. Hyper prototyping is this, okay? That same concept, but with limited resources. Okay, hyper prototyping is one of my favorite things to do in our company. I want to hyper prototype a new product. I want to hyper prototype a new service. I want to test it in a small pool with limited resources, with limited effort and energy. I don't want to make a perfect design that we're going to roll out and be like, this is it. This whole podcast experience and this show is a hyper prototype of a longer conversation, right? So I'm hyper prototyping here and just getting content out there and sharing what's on my mind. So what can you do with limited resources? Pull that together, encompass that, put it in a project folder, and say, this is my hyper prototype. This is what I'm going to put in, and this is the results I want to see. And with that data, I'm going to make a judgment call to go all in or test it more, or give it more, put more time into it, or bring in a partner or whatever. Hyper prototype it. That's the best way to overcome overthinking. And there's nothing wrong with overthinking. But again, going back to the very first thing, over and overthinking equals fear of failing. Okay. Oh, there's so many ways this thing could fail. It could go sideways. All right. That's the over part. So anyways, this is the podcast. I hope this conversation helped you navigate this overthinking and really understanding the brutal, honest truth about overthinking. And it's actually really good because you at least know where you're at. And you could look back and be like, what projects or what ideas have I overthought that I never executed? And let me tell you, take out a notepad. I call it a napkin idea, a napkin strategy. Pull out a napkin, write your ideas out on it. Don't overthink it. Just say, this is the basic concept. If I can't communicate a concept simply to anybody, it's probably not there yet. It's probably not fleshed out. If I can't say it in a few sentences, this is the problem, this is the solution, this is how I see, this is the common belief around this is the desire that people have to overcome. If I can't explain that or communicate that in a simple way where it's really confusing, it's probably not baked yet, and you got to work on it more. Okay. So I hope this episode helped you. If it did, please leave a comment, leave a review, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the podcast, share it with someone that you think needs to hear it. Please, I'm not looking for rapid or hyper growth here. I want to grow with you. I really want to hear back from you. I really want to know if this is helpful for you. And I really want to participate in your process, your creative process here. So please reach out, leave a comment. Do not be afraid. I do not bite. If you have any suggestions of topics or things that you want to hear from me, please let me know. DM me, comment on the show, email me at yes@brandingbeyondbusiness.com. If you know someone that should be on this show, please reach out to me, and I would absolutely love to reach out to them and see if we're a good fit. I'm not going to have everybody on the show, right, that wants to be on the show, because this is my gosh dang show. So I get to be very picky. All right, I'm going to have a lot of friends on the show that I think has a unique voice in the space and a message to say, and I can't wait to get them on here. But so far, what do you think? Branding Beyond Business, please leave a comment. Get back to me. Follow me on social medias at John Mediana. Yes, media is in my name. It also means medium in Spanish. I know that. So yeah, like, share. Oh, also, can you hit a review, 5 stars, if I'm good to you? 5-star review on iTunes, please. And yeah, y'all have a great rest of your day, and thanks for tuning in. We will see you on the next episode.